question is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Hello, and welcome to another episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. On today's episode, we have Neil Schneider, who is a Chief Technology and Product Officer at K1X. Neil, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rosie. Appreciate it.
So, Neil, I know you and I met probably a month or so ago, and as we were talking, we realized, oh, we kind of have similar roles, or we had similar roles, and we were exchanging war stories, and that's when I thought, you know what, Neil would be perfect for the podcast. So, can we start? Can you tell us a little bit about your role at K1X, what K1X does, and kind of your day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think you hit on my role. When I talk to folks out in the market, or just even within our organization, on the T and the P side of that equation, I'm probably more on the T side, on the technology. My background's full stack software engineering, just computer science engineer degree in general. So that's where I've spent most of my background. I'm also in charge of our security and privacy at the organization. I'm in charge of our IT infrastructure, our cloud infrastructure, our data science falls underneath me, and the product management function does fall underneath me as well. We've got some folks that help me as far as kind of planning the products, mapping out the products. I've got a co-founder, president of our organization that plays a key role in that to help me, but I work with helping the product team kind of execute on our day-to-day with that. So that's a little bit of my role. Definitely kind of crossed a lot of different threads and topics from day to day and all that, to spend time with clients as well, and hopefully drive innovative solutions out in the market. And specifically about what we do at K1X, our solutions are evolved around, it's tax software. So it's complementary tax software to maybe some of that larger tax prep and compliance process. And we focus specifically around the K1 documents. So without getting too tax heavy on a identity or security podcast, it's a particular document that's really sticky, heavy, complex document that gets issued from investment partnerships. So, you and I we're part of like the Edison Portco. That's a that's a fund, and a fund can be an investment partnership like that, where they're the general partner, and then they got LPs and all their limited partners. They get K1 documents probably issued through the Edison Fund. So that's just kind of draw an example. And we've applied artificial intelligence to work with these documents, to extract it out of what is really a big, ugly PDF, and putting it into a structured fashion in a SaaS-based kind of workflow with that in that space. So that's kind of a key piece where our products do. And then we also have some compliance software around that we integrate with, and helps any of these institutional investors or folks that are investment partnerships. So we're trying to digitize the entire K1 ecosystem. That's our goal. Take it from paper into digital connected ecosystem.
Yeah, and whether it's tax software, security software, whether it's a game or social media application, some of the core tenets of what I really wanted to talk to you about remain the same, right? And I think what's interesting about having you on is the discussion around the types of organizations that, if you're a security person, if you're the kind of person that listens to this podcast, you're usually not hearing from, right? You're usually hearing from that infrastructure person, that audit person, the security person, right, who is talking about what is going, the trends that are happening. But in the past, there used to be a clear separation between developers, infrastructure, security. Everyone kind of hated the security person because they were, mandating all of these things that made developers' lives a headache. There was the idea that there was a clear separation between the role of I am responsible for security in the organization. I only care about that. I'm responsible for development in an organization. I only care about that. But when you talked about what you do, you talked a lot about security things in it. Can you tell me a little bit about where you've seen, particularly, in the last 10 years or so, where developers are a lot more security minded than they might be, let's say when you first started and you were a developer?
Fantastic question. I can definitely relate to that. So it's funny how you said like, oh yeah, the security function was the thing over here, and then they'd kind of come down and tell you to go do stuff, and then you'd be like, I don't understand. I just want to write my code and get it out there. And my personal journey, I think, actually relates to that a lot. And kind of my background, my history tied to that, I've experienced that where I was the developer that, said, why do I have to do this stuff that the security functions, telling me to do? Because I was a part of a large enterprise. Our software actually was built inside an accounting firm, and part of our background of it, I was the original architect developer on that stuff, and we carved it out into our K1X company. So I went from the large enterprise world into kind of the startup small space world. So what I had to do as as the chief technology officer at the time when we carved out was, hey Neil, you're the closest thing to security that we have. Can you fill out our cybersecurity insurance application? Can you help us with our SOC 2? Because we have that expectation from our clients that we were getting when we were inside an accounting firm. So I went on a fast track to learn kind of all the things you need to consider from a cybersecurity perspective inside a SaaS company. So grown a huge appreciation for that, where I think I was getting kind of small bits and chunks along the way because I didn't really understand the broader impact to the organization that could come if you didn't have all the proper processes, education, tooling in place for your engineers all the way into your production environment tied to that. So hopefully that gives you a kind of an idea of that. But introducing tools like a Sneak for code scanning, static code scanning, that shift left in security, super important. And then also understanding your SDLC cycles and your change management tied to your the SOC 2 compliance, super important for me as well. So.
Yeah, and what's interesting, what you just said is that, as an individual contributor, as an individual developer, you might see something coming from security as kind of some mandate that is an inconvenience, right?
Yep.
I have to now follow this process. But as you moved into that role, right, as you kind of led the team, um, you now started to see the why, right? Whereas before, potentially you were just exposed to the what you had to do. Now you had the why. But I do also feel that modern development, people, even down to the developer, they understand the why more than maybe a few years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the idea that I mean, there was a time where things were very open. It was kind of the wild west. Everyone has admin access. Everyone can check out code and push code to production. But as people are more and more aware of kind of the threat landscape, because it's not isolated to just a security person or kind of the news that's exposed that a security person kind of looks to get. I think people are becoming more aware, whether it's a developer or even Susan in marketing, and being aware that her actions of clicking on this link on this email is something that could put her organization in danger. Do you feel that, like, from your developers, there potentially isn't as much pushback as you might have had 10 years ago?
Yeah, 100%. And we do. I'd like to think we do a pretty good job in our organization to emphasize, especially with the data that we're dealing with. You've got PII data in there. There is private tax information data in there. There's nothing more that can bring an organization to its knees than like a breach or data that gets leaked out because of just what I'll call, we got lazy on our processes, or we went with the high trust model or the best intention model, which is nice, but that doesn't scale very well. So you got to have good muscle building at the beginning to then, I'll say, maybe go through some of that pain, learn and help how it benefits the organization. And then by the time you scale and grow, you've got all that in place tied to it. So yeah, our engineers are, they're very understanding of what we need to do. They're very aware of that. I've even had some of my engineers just bring up like, hey, noticed XYZ thing. We might need to put this in place to make sure we're thinking of security that's tied to it. So yeah, I think they're very receptive to that, and then just my organization in general. I've had folks reach out to me in the organization of just like, hey, I got this suspicious email. Should I take a look at this, or do you want to take a look at it? Did it fire off an alert or something like that? I've had people reach out to me about that, which is
So we have been talking about the aspect of security from a developer's perspective, right? How a developer thinks about security, and if we think about your role, right, where it's kind of like the engineering side and the product management side of things. Let's switch gears and talk about the product management side of things.
okay.
Um, so, as someone who runs product management, as you have to think about the product and the security within the product,
Right.
how has that changed? What mindset? How do you approach product management and building and even gathering requirements for new functionality with that the security kind of in the back of your mind of I need to make this secure. I need to make sure that I'm protecting this data.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a great question. I get the I get the benefit from, I'll say, having in a just past experience in a highly regulated industry that is tax and accounting. There is an element of like a needs to know kind of security requirement or security posture. So we tend to, with most of the work that we do or the product that we're planning, look at the feature and run it through that needs to know requirement lens. That's usually a big driver for us because then we need to know we got to bring in our security model and put permissions on this stuff. Are we creating new data that then only certain people should have access to? We also have to consider sometimes, depending on our users, if they have offshore users as well that are part of that, because then that may drive the workflow a little bit because they just even inside the accounting firms that we sell the software to, they have some of their own requirements that have to get put in our software so they can support having an expanded workforce inside of our product as well. So there's a lot of different nuances there that are tied to it. And then usually as part of a definition of done, just to make sure we'll have, various checks of automation or things that we have to have put in place to make sure they get completed as part of the work. So as well.
So when it comes to whether it's the security of the product itself, securing obviously ensuring that there's the right controls for securing the data that you are essentially hosting for your customers, right, and processing for your customers. Whether it's the on the development side of things, and we're talking about non-human identities and API keys and tokens and all the ways that modern development is done and the way applications talk to each other, as well as the application developer and what they can and cannot do. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think identity plays a role in all those aspects of your day-to-day job?
Mm, interesting. Can you repeat a little bit on the front end of that question again, and then kind of how identity plays into it? Just
Yeah. So
yeah.
so the understanding of you know in securing the product, for example, there's an element of understanding who is the person that's logging into the product and what they can
Yep.
and cannot do, right? So really, not necessarily an account, but the human behind it, right?
Uh-huh.
When it comes to building applications, the human behind who's writing that source code and what they can and cannot do in your code repository, for example, as well as the non-machine identities, the ways that the application is talking to another application potentially. Um, in all the ways that ultimately it comes back to a human, um, and securing the whether it's securing the product or securing the infrastructure for that human of the builder versus the consumer of the product. How does identity play a role in kind of ensuring that you are protecting the ecosystem?
I think maybe as a from a blocking and tackling kind of technical perspective, I think you run a lot of it through the lens of how are you doing your workforce identity management at your organization, right? So, and does it have kind of the capabilities, tools, information along the way where that identity can be passed clean, accurate, tight, secure, etc. So We use Azure Active Directory as part of our M365 thing. So that's our brain for our workforce organization. So thus, like everything that we implement, we run it through the lens. Can we SSO with that, right? Can we do that? Because then you can trust that source of that identity for whatever process that we're going in, the human behind the curtain, if you will, that are using it. I think that's super important. Then in your products, you might have to run that same lens, because we actually use Okta for our customer identity management. I wish I was using Auth0 type of thing. I went through a learning curve on that just some past experiences, but we are using Okta for identity management in our products. And then a main big reason that we did that is because the workforce identity management base that Okta has, it's got nice support for single sign-on connections and some out-of-the-box connectors. It actually makes it very easy for us to engage with our clients and our users. We don't have to maintain a lot of single sign-on, and that helps us just from product value proposition that we support single sign-on, but then it also helps us downstream as engineers or developers to make sure we can trust, the single Okta token, that it's gone through all those layers, and it reduces some complexity load as you're building code. So I think there's those two pieces. And then three, if you look at it from a product management function, if we're not perfect on it, but if you think of personas and you do persona-based stuff in your product management, that's going to help you think of the identity of your users or your type of users, and then that should downstream help with the conversations of how you got to build the features or functions and run the security layer through it. So those are kind of the three things that I could think of from a tech tool process people perspective, if you will, as far as identity goes across all those layers.
Yeah, and I would imagine, again, given what you said, that your product you're dealing with pretty sensitive data, right? The kind of data that obviously your customers would not want exposed. The interesting thing with personas as it relates to product management is that traditionally the way that you think about, if you're doing product management, you think about a persona, you think about what can this person do and what can that person do and what could this persona do and that. But especially when you're talking about data that is the kind of data that you need to secure, equally important of what can this persona do is what can they not do, right? What should they not be able to do
Yep.
because they don't have the right role, or they don't have the right, or they shouldn't have that specific role. When you are developing your user stories, when you're developing the product, is that kind of an integral part of the conversation, right? Not just what can this person do, but what should this person not be able to do because that is a potential security threat.
I think it's a great question. Would I be able to stand here and say we're consistently doing that across every story? I'd say maybe not. But I do think the concept of what I'll call that zero trust mindset, I think is something that we do discuss based off of the type of work that we're doing within that especially if we're creating a new feature and it's a new page or a new function. You're usually asking those basic questions of what can this person do within here, or what roles are able to do this stuff in here, and then what do we need to make sure that we lock down. So we recently just implemented an API integration with our product. That was a big undertaking for us. A lot of the initial infrastructure base bones had to get built first, and then we threw in a handful of endpoints to create some capabilities. But security was huge in that perspective, and we're taking baby steps even on that to. We realized we couldn't fully implement the beautiful, I'll say, OAuth pattern, right out of the box. We started with a key-based approach, but we locked that down of who could create the keys inside the application. And then once those keys come in, making sure we've got all the right security layers in the pipeline to ensure that key has access to what it's trying to get access to, and lock all that down, as opposed to running it through our main API that our user experience integrates with. We created a separate pipeline or separate path for the APIs tied to those tokens as well. So maybe a little bit of a longer answer there, but hopefully that gives you an idea.
I love long answers. It'll give some work for our producers, some work for the producers to do.
All right.
So So this has been fantastic. This is actually the part of the podcast where I think I told you we do several serious questions and then we do
Oh,
one fun question.
okay.
Um, I've decided that up until the end of the year, I'm going to somehow weave the movie Die Hard into every podcast.
Okay.
Um, so that and we are very close to the holidays. So inevitably, I have to ask the question. Obviously, you've seen Die Hard,
Yep.
of course.
The infamous
Um,
debate question is coming, isn't it?
I mean, so first of that's not the question. Isn't have you seen Die Hard? I would assume that you would have seen Die Hard. The
Oh yeah,
question is Die Hard a Christmas movie,
100%, 100%.
and why?
Uh, because it's talked about, is it a Christmas movie all the time around the Christmas holiday, and most of the time people watch it around the Christmas holiday. I'm not picking up Die Hard in May at
Yeah,
Memorial Weekend. Not doing it.
yeah.
It
It's like watching a
comes.
Christmas Story in May. Why would you do that?
Yeah. When I think of Nakatomi Plaza, I'm thinking I'm gonna probably, unopen or open some presents, and my wife and I are maybe having a bottle of wine and wrapping presents for the kids, and we're watching Die Hard. That's just what's happening.
Right.
So,
And the thing about that question, and I bring up that question a lot, is it's a deeper question than it might seem, right? Because the question
yeah.
really is what makes a Christmas movie. So Home Alone. Is Home Alone a Christmas movie? Most people will say, yeah, well, yeah, Home Alone is a Christmas movie. It happened during Christmas. Um, but the core of that story is that the parents went away with the whole family and they forgot the kid behind. Well, that could have been a summer vacation. It didn't have to be a Christmas vacation, right? There
Hmm.
was really nothing about that movie that had to happen on Christmas Day, right, or Christmas Eve or around the Christmas season. Die Hard absolutely had to happen during Christmas. He was visiting his wife because it was Christmas to see his wife and kids. They attacked Nakatomi Plaza because it was Christmas and there was less security. And they needed to go during the holiday party after hours because the CEO would be there and can open the safe. Christmas is an integral part of that story. Take Christmas out, you have no Die Hard, right? You could take Christmas out of Home Alone and you still have Home Alone. You can't take Christmas out of Die Hard and have Die Hard, right?
Man, you are a pro. That's deep
I've had this
research. I
discussion.
love
I've
it.
thought about this way too much. And the thing that gnaws at me is could we take what most people consider 100% a Christmas movie and make it not. I mean, Home Alone is one example, right? And you can make the argument, well, the reason the whole family was going away to France, I believe, I think they were going to France, was because it was the holiday season. But are there things that and people and there are people in the world as weird as they are, as it may seem, that don't think that that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. You know, I wonder if we can take a Christmas movie that almost most people agree is a Christmas movie and spin it so that it's not a Christmas movie.
That's
You know,
tricky. Yeah.
I mean, Home Alone is the one that I can think of because the idea was
Yeah.
it was. Well, actually, you know what? No, I take that back. Christmas was part of that. The reason they decided to rob the houses is because a lot of people in the
They're
neighborhood do
gone.
go
Yeah,
away
they're
on
gone for
Christmas.
Christmas.
The
Yep.
the houses are empty, so that's why they. Okay, so I take it back. Home
Your
Alone is
chance of
absolutely a Christmas
success.
movie.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
but I
But you could
cannot
you could
think.
apply that. You could apply that to summer vacation or spring break or fall break, right?
True. Yeah.
You're allowed-
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
possible.
summer. Yeah, summer people go away in the summer, right?
Yeah,
They go away during spring break. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. So
throwing it
I don't
out
know.
there.
I don't. Yeah, possibly. But something to think about. You know, is there a 100% Christmas movie? Like, there's certain things that like Christmas Story is absolutely a Christmas movie,
Right?
right? I
Can
mean,
you untangle it and use the same plot line without Christmas in it?
all right.
That
What
would
if
be
it's his
interesting.
birthday and it's not Christmas? He wants the gun for his birthday. Could you still have a Christmas Story without Christmas? So the whole point was he wanted the gun, right? And
Right?
he didn't
Yep.
think that his parents would get him the gun. Um, the plot device was the acquisition of that gun. and something that he wanted for Christmas because that's when he would get a gift. So what if it's his birthday?
So that you can definitely draw that parallel. I think that's reasonable, but there's a lot of, I think, the element of Santa, if you will, and being good so you get the gun. There's a lot of activities along the way that your birthday it just kind of shows up and it's going to get celebrated and it's going to happen where, if you're swearing when you're changing a flat tire on the side of the road, that may have, not happened during Christmas, or I don't know, or
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe
And
there's
I
just
guess would a parent withhold a birthday gift because the kid was bad? Well, I mean, not that a parent would potentially withhold a Christmas gift, but the kid is convinced that that Christmas gift is not coming from the parent; it's coming from a third
right,
party, and that
right,
third party is auditing their behavior, right? Much more
right,
strictly than their parent
right,
is auditing their behavior. So you could argue that, yeah, Christmas is the only situation where a third party based on your behavior, a third party decides on whether or not you get the gun.
right, right.
Okay. All right. I could be convinced. All right. I think we settled it. A Christmas
Okay.
Story is definitely a Christmas movie. Die Hard is absolutely a Christmas movie. And Home Alone, also Christmas movie.
Yeah, I think so.
All
I think
right.
so.
Well, we accomplished a lot. Neil, again, thanks so much for doing the podcast. Definitely would love to have you back. And we'll talk soon.
All right, that sounds good. My pleasure. Appreciate it. Appreciate the invite. I enjoyed this, Rosie. It was good.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Plank. Until next time.